What's up, everybody? Brothers, sisters, psychonauts, and seekers of truth. It is Ananka, and welcome to my bazaar. Today, I have a DOM trip report for you. The title of this trip report is To Feel the Forest, and was submitted to Earwid in 2020 by the user Llama. With all that being said, let our story begin. Here I will tell you the story of my first real DOM, aka STP trip, which was a peaceful and spiritual journey through a magical forest, a timeless vacation with a good friend of mine. I say my first real trip because I already tried 2.5 milligrams to test the water. Unfortunately, DOM still is a research chemical after all the years. There's not much reliable information to find on the net, except of the reports, so I figured it would be a good idea to start low. And that was fine. 2.5 milligrams gave me a good level of energy for a long time, and a bit of the psychedelic mindset. That was at Waldfrieden, a psytrance festival, and I figured that it was good to dance. And I already there felt the peace with the energy on top of it that DOM gives. I changed a lot between dancing and just hanging around, and it was a nice day, but definitely low dose. So after realizing that the things people wrote in their reports also apply to me, which is not always sure with psychs, I felt much more safe and ready for the 5 milligrams. Nevertheless, I called it my first DOM trip because the 5 milligrams was so different from the 2.5. And maybe it is not the strongest intoxication, but for sure the strongest change of consciousness for me to date. A bit about me. I am 19, not that experienced, and just beginning to dive deeper in my mind than ever. Slowly beginning to see all the mysteries to come in the future for me. I really enjoy smoking pot, and I had a lot of MDMA, 2CB, and a few good trips on shrooms. Nothing over 2 grams, to name the most important. Other than that, there was the Amanita muscaria, also to appear in the report, salvia, and amphetamine. I already learned a few things about the psychedelic state of mind and how to enjoy it. So it feels like coming back to a beautiful hidden garden in my mind, and I call home with joy every time I am there. The story. I spend the weekend in mid-September at my old flat share with a good friend of mine still living there, and Josie, who will be my trip sitter and who I haven't seen all summer long because she just came back from Indonesia. I carried some illegal things along, including 5 milligram DOM tabs, and there it is. The rare chance to do a 7-hour trip with a good friend on a sunny day with the last warmth of the summer. I take the chance and the DOM on Saturday morning at 11:20 after waking Josie with a morning joint. 11:20 plus 0. I enjoy lying in the sun outside, while not enjoying the bitter taste of the DOM, but I knew that before. I leave the tab under my tongue until it loses its taste of the most bitter thing I've ever tasted. That is CA 20 minutes after ingestion. +1. Josie leaves for meditation, and I begin to feel the little nervousness of something big to come. Like when you hear a train on the tracks, long before it arrives and takes you on a trip. From here on, I feel the energy increasing very slowly and constantly. 2 hours in. As we are in a small Danish town by the sea, and there is a beloved forest along the coast, we decide to spend the day and trip in this forest. At first, I am skeptical about that, because we have to go through public space to get there, and I'm already in the psychedelic mindset. The peak is about to come. But after getting there, I am really grateful that Josie convinced me of going. The forest is the perfect setting for the trip. I don't have any nausea or stomach problems at all, which surprises me in a positive manner. A lot of people write about nausea with DOM, and with tripping in general, so I didn't eat for breakfast, and my last meal was CA 10 hours ago. That paid off, I would say. The hunger faded with the increase of the energy, but from now on and all through the trip, I can eat a little in between, and it's tasty, although my gullet feels uncomfortably tightened, like with 2CB. As we go to the forest, I am not going. I am rather floating. It feels like my center of thinking and feeling moved out of my brain and is now a few centimeters over my head. This seems to lift my body too, and that's why I'm floating. The DOM gets more and more intense as we go. There are short rushes of energy in between. 2.5 hours. As we finally enter the forest, I also enter my trip, and the forest welcomes me with some nice colors. They seem to shine out of themselves, so that, for example, a bunch of red berries become a swirling red cloud of light and color. So yes, there are the enhanced colors, and a bit of open-eye visuals, but it's not pronounced. 2 hours and 40 minutes. We rest under the trees for a while, and I'm still in the coming up. I am really focused inwards by now, and I'm a bit confused in my actions, but don't feel confused. I feel very clear-headed, or high. My thoughts are free, lucid, and transparent. This is what lets people say it's more like mescaline than LSD, though I can't tell because I haven't tried either of those. I get into a strong state of trance after a while, in which the energy that got enormous, yet not overwhelming, focuses. The energy is flowing freely out of my body and around my head, focusing not as one might think on one spot, but in a long vertical gap right before me. Meanwhile, my eyes are closed, and my breathing is so slow and quiet that it is almost not perceptible. Yet I am more than fully conscious of it. In fact, I'm very conscious of all my surroundings, and all my senses are increased. Josie interrupts the trance sudden, and I'm sitting in the forest again, surprised about this deep experience. I am more of a chill guy, but I've never been in such wonderful and strong peace like that, and when I meditate, I am far away from such a feeling. After this trance, Josie tells me she has a good contact high by now. The contact high is an interesting aspect of psychedelic drug use, and appears from time to time in the literature, but not much is known about it. But now, it is real. This is a definite proof of a higher connection between human beings that no one can refuse. She feels the body load, the high, and other characteristic tripping things like a changed perception of time. For example, later as we go, she tells me it feels like going on a hamster wheel, like a loop. It's always the same, and we don't get forward. Her trip lasts from now on throughout my trip until tomorrow, and probably benefits from all the hash we smoke on the way, and from Josie's previous drug experience. She's a bit more experienced than me. 3 hours in. At this point, we smoke the first joint of what now is our mutual trip. This lets the beginning peak lift off into space. The hash intensifies the feeling of inner peace, as well as the color, and primarily the light sensitivity. The visuals are more pronounced too, but they are at no point in the foreground of the experience. I can let them appear and disappear as I wish, something I learned from previous trips. Without this ability, I probably wouldn't have open-eye visuals at all. Though there constantly is a light, transparent psychedelic pattern covering the sky, like with shrooms, 2CB, and even very pure MDMA sometimes. Here, the tiny pieces it's made of are mostly hexagonal and surprisingly more profane, less details and ornaments than with other drugs. There also is the typical tunnel vision and getting lost in details, but the trip is definitely devoted to the higher thoughts and feelings, due to the strong feeling of clarity and purity. Again, I enter into a trance, in all aspects similar to the one described above, but even deeper. Both states of trance begin with a single, deep breath, followed by a long silence and breathing pause. After a while, I begin breathing very slow and constantly. I reach these states without any help, e.g., in form of actually trying to meditate. What makes it interesting that it's focused so much on the breathing, like in meditation. Later I will have more of these states patterned after the first two, but not as strong and shorter. 4 hours. We continue our walk through the forest to a small beach, and as we go, the forest becomes more and more magic and beautiful. The sunlight shines bright through the branches of the trees, giving an uplifting, fresh, but also dreamy look to where it comes through. The forest that was already very special to us. Josie even played a lot in it when she was young. Becomes an enchanted forest. Or, it rather was enchanted all the time, and now I realize its full beauty. I feel a connection to the light, shining and open side of the forest, as well as to the dark and mystical side, that always coexists with the light. The various types of mushrooms growing in these shady spaces only add to the mystic feeling. 5 hours in. As we arrive at the beach, we smoke another joint. I feel this kind of plateau now, and I am enjoying the little breather, just lying in the sand and watching the scenery. There are about 10 other people on the beach. That is pretty small. Just a few families and ramblers. I can handle that situation pretty easily, although I'm usually very anxious and uncomfortable with sober foreigners around while on psychedelics. But on DOM, that seems okay, and is even amusing. I entertain myself a bit with the clouds, which are always good for some nice visuals. The previous mentioned transparent psychedelic pattern isn't fixed to the sky anymore. but is moving with the clouds. It is moving in 3 dimensions and many layers, floating in all directions and stretching from time to time. It is truly enjoyable, and the first time I've seen OEVs like that in 3D. It takes quite a bit of time for me to realize that there, in reality, are crashing 2 enormous wind streams frontal into each other, with their clouds whirling and giving me the 3D effect. The clouds seem to explode. Josie has to confirm what I see several times. This spectacle is even more tremendous as the visuals before. While sometimes, reality is the most fascinating. This is followed by the next spectacle, which was rather a curious play. Josie and me just talked about marriage, when suddenly a bridal couple, in real life, in full attire appears. They make a professional photo shooting about 30 meters away from us. 2 tripping hippies. It's hilarious. It's understandable. The weather is nice, and the huge roots on which they sit, and the whole scenery is beautiful. But with DOM, this scene becomes unreal, and of course, really funny. 6.5 hours. We go back in the forest, and on to a big meadow in the middle of the forest, with lonesome birches, some yaks, and the sea glittering through the trees. It is here we want to collect the well-known Amanita muscaria. The circumstances are good. Birches and the yaks shit. But we don't find as many as last year. Josie is barefoot and can't go on the meadow with all its prickles, so she rolls a joint, and I'm looking for some mushrooms. Starting an epic journey through all kinds of different landscapes, like I was a giant. We smoke the joint and both still feel pretty trippy. We enjoy this incredible timeless peace all around. It is the best vacation we can think of. 7.5 hours. We go back on smaller paths along the coastline. At this point, my inner connection to the Enchanted Forest is increasing enormously. There are tons of different mushrooms everywhere. Some are even glowing. And the strong trees reaching up to the ceiling, filled with bright light. That must have been the reason that Gaudi left, and that he expressed in the Sagrada Familia. It was an incredibly beautiful sight, and an even more beautiful feeling. 8 hours. We decided to stay at a particularly strong tree and smoke one more joint. The effects are now fading, but really slow. We go home after a while, facing the sunset. 9 hours. When we finally arrive at the flat share, we're both pretty worn out, and Josie falls asleep easily, but I am still far too much into it. I lie on the balcony, listening to some schwangel and odd. The psychedelic aspect is now fading faster, while the shaking, uncomfortable, amphetamine-like aspects stay the same, but gets more pronounced, as if it isn't hidden anymore. 12 hours in. Josie wakes up again. We smoke a joint and then try to sleep. I can't sleep, though, and the night is filled with tears and inner emotional conflicts. The insomnia doesn't help. This adds a bitter aftertaste to the fulfilled trip I had. But the next day, things get cleared up again. I get free from these worries and can move on, taking all of the good memories with me. 16 hours. Finally a bit of sleep, but only 3 to 4 hours. I don't know what to do with the inner energy in the morning, and it really irritates me. Later that day, my head is still spinning, and my body is totally worn out and still overheated. This feeling lasts until 36 hours in. 36 hours. This is the final sleep. The next day I'm fine and all effects are gone, although my body needs one more day for regeneration. That's just in time, as it is Monday, and I'm sitting in architecture school again. The aftermath. This experience was a really spiritual one. I think I understood the word spiritual a bit more in terms of actually experiencing the divine within and in nature. These thoughts are not new to me, but there's a huge difference between thinking something and feeling something, and I felt the spirit and life that was everywhere. There were some aspects in this trip that were especially interesting. Firstly, the contact high, which revealed the connection between us on a higher level, which I do not fully understand. I only know of its existence. And secondly, the deep states of trance that really were meditation-like. These feelings of total peace and trance while meditating are subject to many Buddhist teachings. I'm particularly interested in Tibetan Buddhism. These trances, fueled by DOM, felt like what I would think a Buddhist master of meditation feels when he is in deep meditation, fueled just by his mind. This got me interested in Buddhism and meditation again, and from then on, I am meditating more than ever, more or less daily. So that's a really good, long-lasting side effect in a way. But it was not only about the spirits. It was recreational too. It felt so good to be in that psychedelic mindset again, where nothing really matters, yet everything is more important than ever. I also enjoyed the fact that it's so long-lasting. I never tripped longer than 4 or 5 hours on shrooms, and this was double as long. But it shouldn't be longer, I think, after 8 hours of tripping. I was pretty worn out and glad to come down a bit. That's why I wouldn't go more than 5 milligrams. And there is a small price to pay with the, for me, uncomfortable amphetamine effect. But it's absolutely worth it. The serenity, tranquility, and peace are real. I can agree to what the hippies once stated about this drug. I would only add lucidity to it, and you have to watch set and setting, because I think DOM can also turn a bit evil pretty easily, as history already taught us, especially of course at higher doses that bring about a much longer duration. The trip took place in a time of change for me, and it came just right as a beautiful and timeless vacation. But I had some problems integrating the spiritual experience at first. It kind of added onto the already existing confusion about a lot of things, but also gave me a key to solve some of the confusion after a while. After all, the trip was perfect, and whatever I will go through in the future, I will always know that perfection like this really exists. Thank you, Josie. Peace and love. Alright, everyone. That is the end of our story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Share with us your DOM experiences down in the comments below. Check out the other videos and playlists on my channel, and I will see you in the next one, fam. Deuces.